You reckon you know a thing or two about four-wheel drive? Well, I'll bet you don't know what I know. This Nissan Patrol takes a lot of tray and a heavier payload. This one has 5-speed standard. Nothing else has all that. Yes, he knows, but I know.
Nissan Patrol. That's Nissan know-how. Nissan.
Welcome back to another Sus with Sam. We are down in Victoria. This one's a little bit of a fun one because we have seen this at a stack of Melbourne four-wheel drive shows, but I've never actually taken the time to get Kieren aside from the crowd and find out about this car. So we've finally taken the time to do that today. Introduce yourself and tell us about this gorgeous thing.
So I'm Kieren, and this is my 1986 Nissan MK Patrol, which is kind of a weird model that no one knows about.
I think I'm like a lot of people that had no idea that these things even existed until I saw this one at the show once. And I guess it's sort of, from a Toyota standpoint, like what the 60 series was, between the 40 and the 80. It's leaf springs all around, it's turbo diesel, it's really freaking cool, and today we're going to be finding out a whole lot more about it. So, let's dive into it. Well, before we dive into too much about what you've done to the car modification wise and a little bit more about it, I think we should dive into the history of this thing. You've owned it since the previous owner did, and he had it its whole life. Tell us about the car, tell us about what you've done to it, the whole project.
So I got it 7 or 8 years ago as a present from my old man. So I was doing up a couple of less good ones, long wheelbases, a bit like, looked like a GQ but rusty and stuffed.
I'm still sounding like a GQ, but anyway, go on.
Had original suspension, had the original bushes, had original shock absorbers in it.
Really rough then.
So I had to go right through it. And this is for my old plate, so we got it on the road.
Yep.
Probably a year to get it on the road with no money. Like we just used those wrecks that I was doing up.
Yeah.
Threw it all under there, and yeah, it was ready to go. And took that across the desert and all over the place with my old man in the passenger seat.
And now this thing hasn't always been sunshine and rainbows for Kieren. There's a lot we're going to discuss, a lot under the bonnet, a lot in the car, all sorts of stories that have revolved around this car over the 7 years that he's owned it. But I think for starters, we should talk about what we're actually looking at, because if you're sitting there wondering why does it look like it's got a canopy and why it could be a style side ute but it's a wagon and you're all very confused, it's the same as me. So I think, what actual model of Nissan is this and what is going on with this? Tell us about the specifics of the year of your car. I know it's feature packed.
So QMK or 160 series Patrol.
Okay.
Came out in 1979, 4-speed, round headlights, boring.
Yep.
In 84 they came out as a turbo diesel option before Toyota brought out a turbo diesel, so they were ahead of their time. They sold pretty well.
Yep.
A lot of short wheelbases. Now most of the short wheelbases had a fiberglass canopy on them. Removable, a bit like your Forerunners of the 80s.
Yep.
And then in 1986, so this is a first month of 86, Nissan brought out, or in Australia brought out this, which was a steel canopy, all the goodies, suspension seats, power steer, aircon, the whole works.
Yeah.
Wire wheels. This is actually in between. They're meant to have fiberglass, steel flares on it, and this has had fiberglass flares on it. This would have come delivered to Australia with split rims and no flares on it.
Right.
So in the dealership, obviously that would look pretty average.
Yeah. So someone spec'd it up somewhere. Yeah. And I noticed even the factory Nissan PTO winch, which is just mind-blowing, the fact that that's on the front of this thing. But, mate, this thing is absolutely wicked. I mean, I've got a soft spot for retro-looking vintage decals, as you guys can probably tell, is the theme of the channel as of late. So this thing caught my eyes immediately, and we had to come out here and film it. I reckon we start story time under the bonnet, because you guys have probably never heard of the engine that's powering this thing. It was a joint love abortion with Chrysler and Nissan. It's a whole world of baffling whiz-bangery, so let's check it out. Okay, now before we dive into the story time, because it is quite a story, we need to talk about what the f I'm looking at, because I don't even know. Tell the people what we're actually dealing with.
So, as we've said, it's factory turbo diesel Nissan. It's a Nissan diesel. However, this was built between Nissan and Chrysler. So Chrysler somehow had some influence in designing this thing.
Crazy.
Which I suppose is probably why it's got some shortcomings, which is
I was going to
dive
say,
into.
when you think of Chrysler's great achievements, it's not a long list, so that's probably not a great sign. But you've done well to keep this thing alive and put some extra pep in its step. So what's the engine combo? What's the box behind it?
So it's an SD33T, 3.2 litre. Nissan rounded up, made it a 33, but it's a 3.2 litre.
Okay.
With a 5-speed manual behind it. Don't really know too much about the 5-speed. It's smaller than what's in your GQs, GUs.
Yep.
It's got a PDO input off the side of it, which we'll talk about later.
It's very
pretty
cool.
strong, but
it's a straight 6. I thought being a smaller capacity thing, it might be a 4 or a 5, like the Toyota did with the Bundys and some weird specs, but straight 6. It's literally just like a small TD, which is wild. Now, we should talk about the story behind this thing, because it hasn't always been a glamorous hero of a show under here. There was definitely some nightmares. So at the moment it's making 3 times the factory power. But how did we get there? Where did it all start?
So the original engine in it, as we said, it had 121,000 Ks, but in the previous life somebody had cooked it. It was not happy.
Yep.
Did a head gasket on the way to an outback trip, probably 6 hours from home.
Perfect.
Drove it home though, made it no worries. Pulled that apart. I had a new genuine cylinder head that I sourced from Japan to put on it. We'll just slap that on it, call it done. Pulled it apart, found it was pretty sad. So we went ahead and did like a full top to bottom, genuine everything, rebuild on it.
Yep.
And I drove it like that for a little while, a couple of thousand Ks, and went, this thing's pretty slow still. We'd gone from like a factory 40 kilowatts at the rear wheels to 60 kilowatts at the rear wheels.
Big power.
Oh yeah, huge power. And it was slow still.
Yeah.
Smoky, just no good.
Yeah.
And then we went to a more modern turbo, so we put a ZD30 turbo on it.
Okay.
So off a grenade, and that's what it did to it.
Perfect.
It, yeah.
So it's keeping true to its Nissan roots, but blew it up. That's good. Then leads the next chapter of the story. So you thought we were done. No. We're just warming up. Okay, so you've now got a 2-piece crank and a car that doesn't run. What's the next step?
So, yeah, as we said, it was all brand new. Done like 8,000 Ks since putting ridiculous amount of money into making it as it looks now. So do I throw that away and go to a newer engine?
Yeah.
Thought about that and was like, well, we're just going to be throwing away heaps of money that's brand new in this thing.
Yeah.
Could have put a standard crank back in it and wound the power back, but that's boring, as everyone knows.
Yep.
So I contacted a company in Melbourne that did custom built cranks. And they built one, and fortunately it works. So they went out of business like just before the job was done.
Yeah. So they almost built one. They built 80% of one.
Yeah. Given a crank with no warranty and no business to go back to, and
Perfect.
fit it yourself.
Yeah. We love that.
So finished it off, put it in. We ended up with some billet rods from Argo Engineering up in Sydney.
Yep.
Billet main caps. Yeah, and the billet crank, and put it all back in. Pretty much everything was the same turbo.
Outstanding. So power figures and torque and stuff, now that it's back together, happy, billet goodness, what are we talking?
So I left it at that 81 kilowatts that broke the standard crank for a year or so.
Yep.
But the standard ZD turbos, they weren't lasting, pushing them a bit hard.
Yep.
So they were flogging out. So I went a bigger ZD turbo, as you do. Went too big, it was too laggy.
Yep.
No good. So went back in between the standard and like a stage 2 ZD turbo.
Yep.
So it's by ProCharge, and Vic, he was absolutely brilliant to deal with.
Yep.
Now we're running like 24 PSI boost, making 95 to 100 kilowatts at the wheels on the 33s.
Yep.
So it goes pretty well.
Yeah, nice.
Probably a tuned TD type of power.
Yeah, cool. And I mean, the engine bay, as you guys will see, is an actual work of art. It's no TD where there's just spaghetti everywhere. Like, this thing is so immaculate and doesn't even need any battery to run, right? Once it's started, it can just go.
Yeah, it's full mechanical. It's,
Yeah.
to turn the thing off, a pull a cable like a tractor.
It's so funny. We'll show you in the car. It's hilarious. But yeah, it really is an immaculate thing. I think while we're at the front, we should probably talk about some of the aesthetics and the bar work and bits and pieces that you've done. Obviously, protection and reliability and capability is probably at the forefront. So bar work, the winch, the lights, talk about it.
So it came with a farm gate when I first got it.
Nice.
Aluminium. I put
Beautiful.
I put like an extension in it to fit a winch.
Yeah.
So it sat a good metre out in front of the car.
Classy.
Then I found this on Marketplace, ARB like winch bar, or deluxe winch bar, I think they call them.
Yep.
Out of production because no one has these cars anymore.
Yep.
They sit pretty flush.
Super sick. All right, well, let's jump around the other side and we'll talk about the side steps and the rear bar. Okay, let's talk protection. Always use it. No. Bar work wise, what are we looking at? Obviously a set of sliders, probably custom for something like this, or?
So, you might be amazed they're genuine Nissan accessories.
You're kidding.
Nah, so, they weren't fitted to this car, but I found a set, Western Victoria somewhere. They're pretty good. Obviously, it's a genuine Nissan accessory. Like, most of them had aluminium side steps, as you'd see on like GQs, GUs, that sort of thing. Completely useless, but these are actually a proper tube slider, I suppose.
That's crazy. God, Nissan chose violence in the 80s, didn't they? They were really out to kill Toyota. I'm impressed. They look sick. The whole car looks sick, might I add. One thing I love about this more than just about anything is the wheel combo on this. I've never seen a rim like it. Is there a bit of a story behind these?
So they came with a car. They were fitted at the dealership, so dealership optioned, I suppose. Probably the dealership put them on there just to sell the car. It would have come with grey split rims like a Troopy, with no flares. So you can imagine with these decals down the side of it. Yeah, probably would have looked pretty average. Yeah, they're a Delta Hurricane wheel. They they sit pretty well. Yeah,
it suits the car perfectly. I think in terms of period correctness, so gangster. Wheel choice, tyre choice. Sorry, the Mickeys. What size? You went something bizarre with these, right?
Yeah, so they're a 33-inch tall tyre, but they're 10.5 wide. So most of your 33 15-inch wheels are 12.5. Yep. As you see, they sit pretty flush with the guard now. If you want a bit wider, they'd hang out.
They have some dramas.
Yeah, probably police.
Yeah, big time.
Or rip the flares off it. So yeah, I went something pretty skinny. They fit pretty well. Yeah. And obviously keeps it driving nice because you've got a skinnier tyre.
Big time. Suspension-wise, we're looking leaf springs all round.
Yep. Ultra comfortable.
Yeah, I can imagine. The chiropractic bill would be through the roof. Have you done anything in terms of suspension, shocks and stuff?
So it's got just a full Older Man Emu 2-inch lift. Yep. It's meant to be a 2-inch lift. It sits pretty low, which I like. Yeah. Keeps it road manners good. And being a short wheelbase, you don't really have to worry about the clearance and your ramp over and that type of thing. So it performs pretty well. Yeah,
you've done well. Diffs we should talk about. Obviously, you're going on a trip. You want it to be a capable forward drive. Lockers?
Yeah, so it's got front and rear ARB air lockers. Luckily enough, the diffs are kind of similar to other Nissans. The front diff is pretty much been put in every Nissan street car from the 90s. Perfect. The rear diff is a bit like a GQ or GU front diff, so an H233B, 31 spine I think. So it's got a locker very similar to what's in the GU in the rear. Yeah.
Wild. And still factory gear ratios and all that for now?
Yeah, 4.3 standard ratios in it, so probably pretty good. Like, reasonably low.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's jump up the back and talk about the rear bar. We'll pop this thing open because there's quite the touring setup. All right, talk about nice rear ends. This has got one, that's for sure. The bar's been on here for a while. It works. It looks good. Tell us about it.
So it's a Kmart rear bar. Again, not made for it. I picked it up off a wreck. Yeah. Cleaned it up, powder coated it. Very happy with it. You'll notice that it's got a jerry can holder in the spare wheel. The jerry can's a Nissan jerry can.
Wouldn't believe it.
I probably wouldn't leave this on for a big trip. I'll put a water jerry in there, but it looks cool when you're driving around.
It's so sick.
So this came original with certain models of these. So it's actually a Nissan item.
Insane. Super sick. Now, the factory spare wheel would have been a split rim, would have been under the car. Obviously, you beef them up, you put some wheels and tyres on it. You've got to go on the rear bar anyway. So that's why I've got this up here. Good to see the gas. You've got the lighting. While we're here, let's talk about the rooftop setup because you have maximised every inch of face that this limited roof has to offer. Roof rack, the whole camping setup, what are we looking at?
So the roof rack's just a Chinese eBay special. Yeah. Aluminium, nice and light. Yeah. Got some max tracks on the front of it, a little light bar hidden under there. Got the 270-degree 23/0 awning. Yep. And I went with an iCamper rooftop tent, which probably not the most popular tent on the market. These were probably the original like hard shell opening clamshell things. Yep. Which a lot of companies are now making. So I picked that up because it was light. They're 57 kilos. Yeah. Okay. So
now I don't know if we've talked about this. I forget often what we started with the episode with, but I just wanted to touch on the decals on this car. I'm sure we would have mentioned it. If we didn't, it's here now for you guys. These things are one of the biggest draw cards for me. I'm such a sucker for a factory old school retro decal, but this side of the car had a mishap that I'll put a photo somewhere in the screen here. And that rendered this side of the car a little less pretty than the other side. So it wasn't that easy to find a replacement of a 40-year-old decal. There's a bit of a story there. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so I we had a wheel fall off on a trip I did in the high country. Didn't do too much damage, but it did ruin the stickers, so I ended up with a Mickey Thompson print down the sticker. Which, look, if you're into decals like Simex decals of early 2000s, you might like, but I didn't.
Yeah.
So the decals were like mint. They were really nice, original. There was some blemishes being 40-year-old, but they weren't faded. Obviously, being a red, usually fade. Yeah. And then trying to find an original-looking decal, and I knew how good they were. Yeah. So there was a few companies out there. I think I tried 3. They were not bad. If you were doing like a rebuild and you didn't have the originals to go off, you'd be like, oh, that's fine. Yeah. But I ended up getting these off a friend in Wollongong. He had a full genuine set, so 40-year-old decals unfitted in the paper, and he had them scanned. And so they're as good as you'll get.
Super sick. I think for a wagon in the 80 series, we fitted the same lift-up windows. Super good mod, especially for touring out of a wagon. It's difficult to access a lot of stuff, and when we open the back of this, you'll see what I'm talking about, because all the room there's no room left. It's all used by stuff. So, but used wisely. So let's pop it open. We'll have a look. What this thing lacks in size, it makes up for in fit out, because these guys are getting ready for a big old lap. Well, not even a lap.
Half lap. Western Australia.
Sort of like what we're doing. And there's not a lot of space, so they had to build a setup. It's very space conscious and well thought out, and I think you've done just that. Run us through what we're looking at in the back of this thing.
Got the 75 litre Dometic Waco fridge in there on the fridge side, and you've got 2 drawers. Yep. Cooker in the top. Yep. Cutlery, all that type of thing, and table.
In this setup, you've got a water tank and the second battery. Correct. What have we got? You got a 50 litre water tank.
Yeah, so 50 litre water tank behind the front seats. Yep. Underneath the travel buddy, which we'll show you. Yep. And
12 volt setup. And I see that there's a lot of 12 volt sockets, but you've still gone just lead acid.
Yeah, so obviously being shore base, there's not a lot of room, and I kind of used all the room before lithium was a thing, so I built this back in like 2019, 2018, I think it was.
Lithium's would have still been extremely expensive. Mind you, they still are ridiculous, but they've come down now.
There's only like maybe 1 or 2 brands you can put under the engine bay, and they're still out of, people still, do we put them under there, do we not? So I've stuck with a lead acid under the engine bay. It works, keeps the fridge going overnight. Yep. Solar blanket keep it going during the day. Yep. So just nice and simple, cheap. Can't go wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Tried and tested. That's going to work. In terms of long range touring, you're about to do a lot of it. Fuel tank wise, we didn't touch on yet. What are we looking at in this thing?
So it's got a 180 litre main tank in the rear. That's in place of a standard 82 litre tank they had. And then I've got a sub tank on the left hand side next to the exhaust and tail shaft, and that's a further 70 litres. Yeah, so a fair bit in a short.
Plenty of fuel. I don't even want to try and work out the fuel, the range that's going to get you, but that's a long way between servos, so that's super sick. I reckon we jump in the car now. We talk about the interior, because it is nostalgia overload. It is full of character. There's a pie oven in there. It's my favourite place to be, so let's jump in it. This is old man nostalgia through and through. I've not smelt or seen something like this since I looked at my nan's linen closet. Now, run us through what is actually, what are we looking at? There's a lot going on in here.
So it's pretty original, which is how I've tried to keep it.
Yeah, it's sick.
It's cool.
It's got
lots of brown. 3 or 4 shades of brown.
I was going to say, it's really brown. But it's also exactly what you'd expect when you think 80s Nissan Leaf Spring four-wheel drive. Yeah. Obviously, it's a tight cab.
It is.
You wouldn't want to be much taller than you, I don't think. I see your legs are a little cramped and whatnot, but
there's nowhere to put your feet on either side of the pedal either, so
perfect, nice. That's really good for those long trips, eh? But we can talk about a few cool things. You've got the GME in here. Yep. Mounted up next to the completely original cassette player and radio, which still works. You've got a couple of gauges down here, keeping an eye on making sure you don't snap that crank again. There's that cruise control button here, which I think is a really cool addition to something old like this. And then in terms of luxuries in here, there's not that many other than probably the travel buddy in between the 2 front seats. Yep. What's the story with the Ruthie approved glove box cover? Tell me about it.
So I suppose nowadays that people are like, who the hell's Ruthie? Which is
such a shame.
I've had a few conversations like that. Who's that signature? Right. If you don't know him, it's a bit sad, to be honest.
Yeah. He's the old guard of the industry, right?
Yeah. So
he's who started this whole YouTube forward driving disaster that we call a job now. So it's
I walked into Melbourne Four Drive Show with a glove box, and I think when he brought out Milo 2, so maybe
Sick.
2018.
Yeah, years ago.
And said, here, can you sign this? He's like, what's this from? So that's how it got there.
Yeah, very cool. 1 stones,
Yeah, 1 stone armrest.
modified to fit.
Yeah.
Very
A
cool.
little bit of trim for the quarter vent windows and
Yep.
fit perfect. So.
Yeah, for someone that doesn't want to ever open those corner windows, you've done a lot of trimming to make them fit still, but that's neither here nor there.
I might have opened when the aircon died in Culinary when that trip.
Sick. Now tell us the story about the electric stop not working off the key. Obviously, this thing, albeit 80, starts and stops on the key. Well, at least it used to.
Yeah.
Now we've gone full tractor spec. What's the go there?
So it starts on the key. It's now got a pull stop from a tractor. I think I got it from eBay. It was from Mahindra or something from India. It's like $10 or something.
Perfect.
I put that on there because it had like an edict motor set up. It's basically just an electric motor that pulled a cable and shut the pump off, which is like 60 series 2H, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Similar style. Yeah, it turned off about 3 times up Billy Goats a few years back. Just when you want it in low range, steep hill.
Yeah, really steep brick of a hill in the high country.
Yeah, and then I think the final straw was when I went to a river crossing, Warrangata River, like halfway up the door type of deal, and decided we're going to turn off in the middle. So
Perfect.
I got rid of it, threw it in the bin.
Nice.
Best thing I ever did.
I can imagine. And now, you know what? Never turns off when you don't want it to.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Awesome.
brilliant.
Now, one cool thing I don't think we mentioned in the video, but we spoke about before, is one of the unique parts of the metal canopy that was offered on these is that they came trimmed
Yes.
on the inside as opposed to the fiberglass didn't, which I think is sick because it really makes us feel like a cohesive wagon.
Yeah, so they've fully trimmed the inside. It's probably looks a bit like a GQ but brown, instead of just fiberglass roof, which would be noisy and loud and just agricultural. So.
Yeah, big time. Have you ever had the canopy off this thing and cruised it open back?
No.
Would you ever do it?
Maybe. I'm kind of...
A lot of work.
It's a bit of work.
Yeah.
There's about 100 bolts holding the thing on, but they do come off.
Yeah.
The fiberglass is easier because they don't have the trim, so you can see the bolts and
Yeah, cool.
rattle gun along and take you 5 minutes. But this one, you got to pull the trim off, and being 40 years old, it'll probably just snap and break. And
Super sick. No,
Yeah.
I love it. Well, I reckon that just about brings us to the end of this. I think we'd be rude not to let the people hear this thing on song, so we might get it started up, warmed up, and give it a little rev before we say goodbye. What do you reckon?
sounds good.